Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our discussion of Early Choices Matter. This is a resource guide for children's long-term support and service coordinators. And this is a project that was supported through the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities and Family Voices of Wisconsin. To get our discussion started, let's talk for a few minutes about why choice making is so important. We really think about participation as being key for everyone, and particularly having intention around building in opportunities for participation for individuals with disabilities. Choice making is an action, it's an active way for individuals to be able to participate in conversations about supports and services, discussions within families around how everyone will be spending time together. And we have really found that everyday choices really provide small steps of practice that really support independent decision making and self-determination as people with disabilities grow older. So for those of you who are working in this role, you have a part to play in this, in that you will be supporting and talking with families and helping them do their own decision making around supports, services, resources, all of the things that go into really creating a comfortable and quality life for families. The Children's Long-Term Support Program really aims at really thinking about how do we support families and individuals with disabilities to really be a part of their own home and community. How do you figure out how to manage all of the daily activities that come with increasing independence, however that independence is defined for an individual? How do we help support families to be thinking about what new skills might be important for both themselves as parents and caretakers, and for individuals to be able to be experiencing and learning and figuring out if those are the things that are really of interest to them over time, and really living your best life in any way that that is defined. So I've really appreciated finding these materials and really a directive and a support from DHS about the work that you're doing to really help families look at quality of life. Choice making and the idea of starting choice making early really does align with DHS guidance. Some special considerations I think is to think about as we're moving through this discussion is how do we think about positive risk taking? How do we talk with families about positive risk taking? And that really is a model that recognizes that, you know, it's scary to think about allowing kids to fail, but that risk taking is really important, a part of life, about dignity, agency, autonomy, really for all people to have the opportunity to practice with support. I really like this quote. We all need to develop skills in making choices in order to have new experiences and accomplishments. And I think that really levels the playing field. It helps us encourage families to really be thinking about your child might be participating in a way that's different than you expected, but that there still really is much room for participation. And then the Deciding Together guide, which there's a resource, a link here from DHS, will give you more specifics on how to be really thinking about taking the initiative to get some of these conversations started with families. Another resource that I found really helpful too was the DHS website providing some very specific examples of what are all the kind of services and supports that we can be encouraging families to consider. Sometimes those are hard conversations to get started because there may be one family who feels like things are going really well, not really sure about how they might be able to use the program as a resource, to families who have more obvious significant needs. And I think having a way to share examples with families about what kind of supports and services that there is financial support available for can be really helpful for them. There's a lot of choices when you look at this document, and I think part of our role is to be narrowing some of those choices for families and giving them really good practical daily life examples about how those might be helpful. Sometimes when you have a 2-year-old, you don't always have the perspective to be able to look much further ahead than your day. And I think part of the role that as providers we play with families is really helping them benefit from our experience of working with many families and kind of looking across the lifespan to give them some encouragement to really be thinking about what things might be helpful over time. So really, we want to get the conversation started about choice making. You may find yourself coming to an annual planning meeting with a family where they've already been thinking about this, or this could be a concept that is completely new to the family. So these are some suggestions of ways to think about how do you ease into that conversation. I think part of it is understanding the importance of choice making, tapping into and looking at some of the materials that are available on the Family Voices website, which I'll have a slide for at the end, will really give you some practical ways to think about how to start these conversations with families. In my own work with families, I think the most interesting and compelling part for me is really making sure that I'm listening in for what their priorities are. And then my job has been to really create a match between what their priorities are, what their preferences are, with what might be available to them, as opposed to the reverse model, which is to say, these are the services that are available. Let's think about how these services, we can make your family fit for these services. And I think a part of that listening for preferences is figuring out for the individual with a disability, whether that's a child, a middle schooler, moving into teen, moving into young adulthood, really listening and finding ways to tap into the family's understanding of what their preferences with, and then also some time with that individual so that you can start to know them and understand what their preferences might be. I think a really important part of these conversations is, as providers, we really serve as a reflection. So I never really thought of my job as coming up with what the parents needed. I was willing to share, my observations based on my experience with their family and with that individual, but instead to really mirror back to them what I'm hearing in conversation about what their motivation is, what those preferences might be, what those unmet needs might be. And then there's a way to make some specific suggestions that how do we take that preference, how do we take that long-term goal, how do we think about starting to put some supports and services in place that will give the family practice or give the child practice to be able to work towards those as longer-term goals. And, for some families, being sensitive to what their family priorities are, what their family culture is, I think also as providers, we can be really helpful in thinking about giving families encouragement and ideas about how their child might be able to participate in ways that they may not have considered yet. I also wanted to be based in real life so that our conversation was moving from this idea of offering choice making in the context of just regular daily routines, all the things that we do already, families are already doing with children, and think about how do we put an overlay on that of, well, where is the connection then between choice making and the range of services? So this is a limited list. I think the graphic that DHS provides is a wonderful tool to be able to go through with families and look at each of those categories of supports and services, and then think about their own family and think about their own child, and try to help them make a match between what are some goals that they have, and then what are some preferences that their child may have, and then how does that fit in with service and support planning. So just a few examples that I took from the DHS graphic are, so the area of personal supports, which really look at promoting independence and safety for the individual. There could be choice making around, yes, the family wants their child or their teen, maybe more appropriately, to be learning about public transportation. These are the places that the child has an interest in going. These are some choices about the ways that they would like to get to those places, so that we're not prescriptive. We're not assuming that because you're a teen with a disability, these are going to be the limitations or the ways that you can meet those goals of spending time in the community and the places that you're motivated to spend. So I'm not suggesting, that we plan unrealistic expectations. I know that there could be limitations on what is available in certain communities, but the idea being not so much about what the outcome will be, but the process that the individual really does have an experience of, even within a smaller group of choices, being able to practice that as a skill. When we look at community employment, what are the preferences of this person? Do they like to, be with people? Do they have an interest in animals? Really opening up some of the possibilities based on their interest and their choices of what might be some opportunities for building some community employment or work training skills. And then the other area within the program is teaching skills and development. Empowerment, self-determination. I think choice making fits in really well here. Really the idea of how do we connect families, how do we connect individuals with disabilities across the lifespan to their own communities, and however they define their communities. That could be the place they live, that could be the people that they like to spend time with, their interest, where do they want to be during their day, where do they want to be on their weekends when they have free time. So an example of that was, choice making around maybe this is an individual who their family is interested in and they are really interested in connecting more around advocacy. So do they want to do a youth conference where they like to, now that we can attend in person again, would they're more of a person who prefers to really, work on some skills, a course, maybe take a course on self-advocacy. Counseling and therapeutic services, I think there's lots of room to be thinking about what is motivating to this individual, how do they like to spend their time, how can we present choices to them in ways that they might understand. So some of this could be language-based, some of this could be pictures of things that are options for them. All sorts of ways, maybe visiting, encouraging a family to visit a couple different programs so that the individual has had enough experience to sort of kind of see what those places are like. And then another example was under health and wellness would be, a family could have this as a goal, the individual could have it as a goal. Sometimes they could be in agreement on this. Sometimes you have to start with small steps. And choice of doing an online fitness class or in-person after-school gaming club, really thinking about how do we keep people participating. Often participation is connected to motivation. We want to be with the people and be doing the things that are of interest to us. And then sometimes we also need a little bit of encouragement, maybe to stretch, to expand those choices and be thinking a little bit about some things that we want to be practicing or trying out now just to even figure out if this is something that we want to be able to do in the future. When you're ready to start talking with families about choice making, one of the resources that we wanted to offer is that we created a companion video for parents, which goes into more detail around how to think about what's motivating for their child, how to embed choices into daily life. And that is a resource that's also available to you on the Family Voices website. And here are some additional resources with websites that are available to you as you explore more about considering how early choices matter for the families that you're supporting. And we really, really do appreciate the work that you're doing in supporting Wisconsin families. Bye-bye.